Welcome to WinDev. My name is Glenn Rathke and I am from wxPerts.com. Today we will be demonstrating WinDev using the Express or evaluation versions available from www.windev-us.com. During this video we will briefly discuss three versions of the PCSoft product line: WinDev, known as WD, WebDev, known as WB, and WinDev Mobile, known as WM. All three products together can be referred to as WX. To a slightly greater extent, we will introduce you to the power of WinDev. If you haven't done so already, you may download the Express version from www.windev-us.com. Once at the site, you'll notice that there's a download menu choice, and you can download WinDev Express or you can download WinDev Mobile Express. Once you've downloaded the product and got it installed using the defaults, you will be presented with a desktop icon for WinDev 21 Express. So let's go ahead and select that, double click to get it running. As this comes up, you'll notice that there's a greeting screen here that talks about the different features of WinDev, or actually the different products. You have mobile and you have the WinDev and WebDev. Looking at this window here, we'll see that we have choices at the bottom, that we have read the concepts, read the tutorial, and then of course buy WinDev. I highly suggest going and reading the concepts. In fact, we'll look at that just quickly here, what's available. These are the different concepts that are available to you within WinDev, so we see how to work with it and what's available to us. We have basic concepts, development environment, databases that it works with, advanced concepts, and how you set up your framework when you're going to be distributing. We also have communications and then the natural appendix at the back. I would also suggest reading the tutorial, as there are good examples in there. And we'll have the different examples for Discover WinDev here, and then you build my first window, and then you have more advanced windows, and you have programming concepts. So what we're going to do during this brief tutorial is show you the IDE of WinDev Express, and actually it's WinDev. This is just a evaluation version. However, the menu choices, the ribbon bars are the same. And quite frankly though, since we have the three product lines, we have WinDev WD, WebDev WB, and WinDev Mobile WM, they all share a very, very common IDE. So once you learn one product, you'll know how the IDE works and where everything else is located. When we come up into WinDev or WebDev or Mobile, you're presented with this screen, and here you can see we can create a project, we can open an existing project, we can open an example that they've included, or we can open up the tutorial and start using that. So for just right now, let's create a project, and we'll briefly discuss what we can do here. Now, in WinDev, we can create desktop applications, as well as we can create universal window applications for Windows 10, and you'll see that right here. We can also create web services. We can create a library, which would be elements used by this application. We can also create rad patterns for when we're going to generate our own type of code and windows that we want to create. We can do a Windows or a Linux service. We can create a Java archive. We can create a component so we can reuse them in other applications that we have. We can create an assembly for .NET, and then we have action plans that we can run. Now, you'll notice at the top we have create the project, open the project here, the same thing up above. So I'm just going to select Windows or Linux application. Okay. Now this is going to start the beginning of what we define our project as. And again, this is the same paradigm for WD, WB, and WM. So for right now, we'll just say that it's going to be Express My Projects. And by default, it goes into a folder called My Projects. Of course, you can change that default to be anywhere that you want. We could attach documents if we like. If you have supporting documentation that you want to keep in your application, this is a great place to put it. And here we can further define whether it's going to be the Windows platform or Linux. So we'll create Windows platform. And by the way, as we create our applications, you'll notice that we can either create the executable as a 32-bit or as a 64-bit. If we take a look at the top of the screen here, you'll see that it's 32. So my environment right now, the IDE is 32-bit. But you'll notice we can still create 64 if we choose to do that. So we'll just create 32. We have the use of a programming charter. And what we'll do is we'll talk about the programming charter and maybe show it later. But the programming charter is just a way to use standards. And if you're in a company, it's a great thing to do. It will do the prefixes for all your objects that you would have. It'll give a specific prefix for a window, for an edit control, for an edit box, for a button, a table, a list. The list goes on. And you're free to change those or create your own charter if you want. You also can choose not to use a programming charter. We'll select Next. Okay. And here we have style books that we can use. How do we want our application to look? So we could select one of these, and that gives us our basic look of what the application would be. So for right now, we'll just select the default, and we'll go on. And then we can actually choose what language we want to use, and we can add additional languages. You'll notice here's the list that we have. And again, this is available for us in all three of the different products that we have. So I will select English, and that's the King's English by default. We could put American English, but for brevity, we'll just use this. We'll select that and move on, and then we have the choice of using a did you know it. So when you start the application, it will display different topics and things that you know. Do you know how to do this? Do you realize this? So we'll select that as a default, not to use that, but it's available to us. And then when we get down to our database, we can say yes, create a new database. Use an existing database, or do not use a database. So if you say yes, create a new database, you have the choice then of selecting SQL Server, Oracle, the included database, which is called Hyperfile, and that's available both as a single user, multi-user on a network, Hyperfile Classic. It also gives the choice of doing Hyperfile SQL, which would sit on a server. So for right now, let's just use create a new database. And as we had just mentioned, where you can use SQL Server, Oracle, you can also use MySQL and Postgres, there's actually native drivers available for that. So if you're going across the internet and retrieving your data, you'll have much better response time if you use native drivers. There's just less chit-chat or chatter going back and forth, and makes your application really responsive as far as returning data. On this next screen, we have the information for an analysis. And all an analysis is it is a data dictionary for us. So we will have a graphical representation of what our tables look like. And so here, it's just saying the analysis name is going to be Express My Project, and you'll see that the directory is again in My Projects. Then it's under the name of the project we're working with, Express My Projects, and then this is the actual name of the analysis. So we'll select that by default, and here's where we can select all the different databases we briefly mentioned, but there's quite a few. And then you've got for the databases that you may not have a listing in here, you can, if there is a OLEDB driver available, you can select that and have it set up that way. But for this example, we will be using HF Classic. And as I had mentioned, we also have client server available to us. So let's just pick Classic. It will be on the local network. Okay. And that's all that I need to do on the initial wizard that's setting up the application. So now it's going to say, create a new description of a data file, or select a description among preset data files. So they will have different data files set up for a contact or for sales orders, those kinds of things. So you could select that, or you could use the data files of an existing database. What's nice about this is if you have an existing database, say it's in SQL Server, you can point to it, bring in the table definitions into your analysis, so then when you connect to the data, you'll actually have the use of the data. Or you can connect to it and say, I want to bring down a copy of that data, and it will bring it into HFSQL. So for right now, we will just use create a new description of data file. And we'll name it people. And we have the choice of creating an identifier, just our primary key. So we'll select that. We'll use HF Classic, like we said, and we're done there. So this has now started the building of our table for us. If we would have pointed to an existing database and a table, it would have brought that in and all our fields would be here for us. But we're just going to create this from scratch. Okay, so here is our first field, which is our primary key that it created. Here is a second field that it created. It's just text, and we could name it anything we want. We can delete it. So actually for right now, let's delete this and say yes. And let's go and add a first name field. And we will default that to text, and it will be 50 characters. We'll create last name and leave it at 50 fields. And that's all we're going to do, as this is just a very simple demo showing what you can do in WinDev. Okay. Once you're finished, and we could have gone and we could have added more tables also, and then we can actually link tables together. Quite a few of the topics that we'll be talking about in here, we will actually have further videos explaining how to do those things. But for right now, we wanted to demonstrate the power of WinDev using the Express version. So what we're going to do right now is use the facility here for creating a new window. And you notice we can create a new window. We can do a report. We can do a query. We can write code. And we can actually go back and do the data again in the analysis. So let's just select window. Okay. And then we have different choices of windows. We have a regular window, we have an internal window, window template, control template. These templates are really powerful in that you can make a generic design and inherit it within your application as you're designing. So for right now, we'll select window. And we'll leave it as a blank window. In fact, no, let's go do it. We'll do a wizard, and we'll leverage some of the possibilities here of WinDev. So we'll use the wizard, and we want to use a standard window. Okay. And we'll do that. And so now we have a blank window ready to go. Okay. The other thing we can also do is we can go to our project and we can do a full application RAD. Okay, this really leverages what we can do with WinDev. And we'll just call this, people. Okay, we'll select this. And now we're going to go back and select the Express People data file. Okay. And these are the different options that we have if we want to use them within the application. So I'll just leave all this on by default right now. And we'll just step through this where it actually created an about window. We'll give it the name of the application's version. These different things can show up in the about if you want. And remember, as we step through these and all these different objects are created, we can customize them. We can add new features to them. We can get rid of some features by deleting the objects. We can write our own code, whatever we want to do or need to do. And again, this is just the automated version of creating an application. You are free to keep or build your own applications from scratch, where you would write every line of code. Or you could have control templates where you inherit things with lines of code that you've already written. And we'll just select all of this and say it's done. And as it's building this, what it's done, it's building these windows now. And let's just take a really quick look at it. These are the windows that it created. We have a win main, we have a win about, we have a form for the people, and then we have listings. So let's go and just run this. Let's see what it looks like. Okay. So here it by default kept the did you know, so we'll say we'll close this. You'll notice don't display the tips at startup, which is one of those features where your users can say, I don't need to see it anymore. And again, all this is customizable. You could actually get rid of this window and not even use it. So here is our main window it created. Here is a menu choice it gave us. And here is the question mark for the help about. So if we go help here and we do about, here's everything that it created for us. Okay. Tells us the name there, and we've got a list of team contributors. If you needed to put that in, who wrote your application, you could put that. You could display your license agreement, which will not have any created right at this point. The other things that we have in here, did you know it, enable the runtime audit, register the product, whatever you need to do in your application. And again, you could get rid of those features or add to them. So let's just go to the people. And we're going to go to a list of people. And by default, this is what it looks like. We have a table control, which would display our data. We now have our create, read, update, delete buttons available to us. So if we were to do new, we can add the first name. We can add our last name. And we could just say validate. And now we have a new record. Let's just go and add one more. And we'll validate that. Okay. Let's go modify this record. And we will just change it to this and say okay. Now that dialog box that we had that came up and said it's the evaluation version, of course, that's because we're in the evaluation or expressed version. You don't have that in the fully purchased version. And as we're talking about these different versions for all three, when you develop these applications and distribute them, there are no royalties of it that you have to pay. It's a straight executable that you own and you distribute it however you choose to distribute that. And as we're talking about distribution, we have the distribution of WinDev applications. We have distribution of WebDev applications where you would take a web application that you've created, and like I had mentioned before, the IDE is the same, the language is the same, you have additional features to take care of functionality from the web, and you would publish that. We also have the distribution for doing Android and iOS within WinDev Mobile. So, and then you work according to the Play Store for Android and the store for iOS, and you get them approved the way that you need to do, as well as the Microsoft Store. Now, what's really nice in the new versions is WinDev Mobile and WinDev can be in the same WinDev application that you use. As long as you've made your license purchase, you can create all those applications within one without having to do WinDev separately and WinDev Mobile. You can do it all within WinDev. Okay, so now we're back to this screen that was created. We also saw the maintenance form that was created. And so now we can delete this record. And we've got a problem here with a dialog function called. What we've done is we're calling up a maintenance or a dialog to delete something like, are you sure you want to delete it? Well, we don't have that in the project. So we have a couple things we can do here. We can import those dialogs, or we can change how we want to prompt the user for deleting a record or displaying information or whatever you have. The reason we left this here is you can see is when you're actually running an application during test mode for yourself, you can go and see what's been happening, and it will also tell you where in that code it's happened. So here on the delete button, line 6, we actually have an error. So if we say debug, we can go and look at that, and you'll notice right here, I can even turn on line numbers. Line 6, it shows us where we have that error, and we could take care of that from here. WinDev in all three products has such a great, robust code editor that we're looking at here. It has a great debugger, so we can actually go and see where the error is at, and we can step through and see how our code is working. Okay? So really what I wanted to do is show you how you can create and how fast you can create an application. And so we kind of did that rather quickly. We can also go back and let's end this running of the test. And if we go and look at the window that does the maintenance, actually the read, update, delete from here, if we take a look at the code, because I just want to show you how simple the code really is. hreset, all it does is it goes out to your analysis, and if you have any default values for a field, it grabs them. You open the window that you're doing your maintenance on, and if it returns back with whatever value you decide, you're going to redisplay the table with all the new results. If we look at modify, then we're going to see if a record's been selected. We're going to open the form, and we're going to display it when we come back. So it's very concise code. And if we go to the maintenance form and we look at saving a record, it's this simple, okay? We have screen to file, which means take anything that's on the screen, move it into the buffer, get it ready, and we do an hsave. What's nice about hsave in this example is it knows whether we're adding a record or we're modifying a record. Again, I'm just wanting to show how concise the code can be. It's a 5th generation language. We easily can do in a couple lines of code, which would take between 10 and maybe 15 lines of code in other languages. Now let's just take a really brief look at the IDE or the environment. And we will have another class or tutorial video on just the environment itself. But at a high level, we have a ribbon bar. And it's got all our choices that we have in here. And if you want to look at it a little differently, we can actually look at it using a toolbar as we did in previous versions. Some people prefer having everything in front of them at once. It's just a little busy, so we'll turn that off. The other thing we can do is actually give us a menu up top here where we can go to the different things. The good thing about WinDev is there's multiple places that you can do the same thing. We can create a new window from here. We can create a new window from over here in the project tree by doing a right mouse click, do new window. We can also come up and do the main menu from here where you can create file or window and do everything new. Okay, so we have a ribbon bar and we've got the traditional new, open, save, close, those kinds of things. We have our edit where we can do the pasting and the copying. We have a find available to us. And then we've got options and panes and those things. Now, while we're here on the home, you'll notice on the left-hand side, we have these 9 options, and they're always visible to us no matter what tab we select on the ribbon bar. So these options over here on the left are the ones that we'll be using quite a bit. And in particular, we have these 2 go buttons. The single go lets you test the window right here without running anything else. And so let me do this. Let's go over to the table. And if I run this, we will not even be presented with the main menu. You'll notice how it comes right here. So this becomes really handy when you're wanting to do your testing without having to run the whole program. If we do the multiple go, this will run the entire project. You'll notice we're now starting from the very beginning. We have a project tab, and this is where you define your project, where you can you can set different aspects of the project. You can look at the code for the project. You can manage configurations. Let's just take a quick look at the description of the project. And you'll notice we have a tab paradigm over here. Every project, every window, every control uses the same paradigm. So instead of having to use a large property sheet, which we have available to us, by the way, if we like to do that, we can come right here and work with anything specific to that object we're working with. Okay? You'll notice that we talked about, where are we at here, with languages, where we can add language. When we created the project, here's where it's available to us. We have the project information here. When we first created the project, you'll remember we did that, where we actually pointed to the analysis. So this is really a summary of what our project looks like. We have a SCM tab in our ribbon bar, and this stands for Source Code Manager. And as with WinDev, their paradigm is to include everything in the product or IDE, or almost everything, as opposed to other languages where you have to purchase a third party for checking objects in and out, or maybe it's not even working well, or you don't even have it, or other products like creating PDFs from a report. Those things are included within here. So it really becomes a nice feature that everything's included, including a setup application. So if you want to distribute your application, you run it through the setup procedure and it wraps it up into an exe or a zip file or whatever you needed to do. Anyway, talking about it's got everything, and the one thing we mentioned was SCM, Source Code Manager. This is done automatically for you if you choose to do it. And I highly recommend, when you're working on an application, simply add the project to the Source Code Manager. The Source Code Manager can be on the local drive, or it can be on a server, and it's using Hyperfile Client Server, their own integrated database. And again, that HF database, you're free to distribute with your applications and not pay any additional license. Okay? So I highly recommend an SCM, and the reason is, if you have multiple developers working on it, it makes it very easy for teams around the world to work on the same project. And it also serves to back up your program, your application, everything that you have and choose to put in SCM. In case you have a crash, at least you have it up on a server somewhere. It also lets you go back and say, oh, I've made a change, and I don't know where I made that change, or somebody made a change and I need to go back to a previous version. You can select a window, do a right mouse click, do get history. It shows you the different versions, and then you can roll them back for yourself. It really is a nice handy feature and really can save you tons of time. We have automatic testing. Another thing that's included with WinDev is you can create tests and you can run them. You can start a robot, so it will start doing all these different things. You can automate that whole testing process to go back and see if you have any regression issues. We have a creation tab here on the ribbon bar, and this is your typical type of a tool where you create on your forms, where you create an edit box or a static control or a button or a table, as we have here. And these are all the things that are available to us. Okay? And then you're free to place them anywhere you want, like any other tool, and move them around. We have a modification tab available to us. So when you're actually going and looking at some different types of controls, you'll notice we can move it up and down on the Z plane. We can do alignments to multiple controls. We can refactor and swapping. So in other words, if you have a table and you want to create a looper out of it, you would select In fact, let's do that. We'll just point it here. So we've got this table here, and we want to do refactoring. We could actually create a looper from the selection. Or, if you have a window, you can create an internal window from the selection. What I'm getting at here is for the controls that are supported, if you decide, oh, I need a different kind of control for this instead of having to create it from scratch, you can say transform it into this new control for us. Okay. We have a description, we have code, so we can see the different codes, code of the selection, and so let's just click on that. It brings us to the window code, which again is another way of doing it is just press F2, takes you there. It's always context sensitive, so now if I press F2 on the modify button, it would take us to the code with the modify button. We have another tab on the ribbon bars, the alignment tab, and you'll notice the different types of alignments we can do. And if we select multiple controls, now you'll notice the additional alignments we can do. We can select the style, okay, show us the styles used, and we can refresh the styles, and we can apply a skin template. And again, we're talking about the IDE, but we'll be going through this in additional tutorials later, as well as advanced features. Some of our tutorials will cover data access, so you can see every which way that you can look at the data. You can do it through just the table itself, you can do it through queries, you can do it through SQL statements, you can do it through stored procedures through SQL Server. We'll have additional classes that will be covering classes. So if you do OOP with your programming, we'll have classes and tutorials based on that. Okay. As we get down to the end here of the ribbon bar, we've got one for the window. And so we can say, oh, we want to put a main menu on here. We want to go to our navigation. We want to do our initialization. Navigation is nothing more than looking at your tab order, of which you can change the order of things. And you'll notice as we've done that on the left-hand side now, we actually see the order that things are in. We can move them from here. One of the choices also was define automatically. So it goes from top left to bottom right. It would number those for you. And if they're not in the order you want, you could just change them. We also have initialization. And for those of you who do know event-driven programming, all the controls on a window initialize at some point when the form loads. They may not be in the order you need, so we are free to change them from here. We have a display, a tab here, and so we can show the tab order. So now if I turn that on, you'll see that they're there all the time. We're showing the anchoring, and anchoring just has to do with when you resize a window, how is the control movement going to happen? Where are they placed? We can show the names of controls, right? That makes it handy to know what you're working with. You can do all these other things. Border, surface of controls. We can change how much we want to see on the screen, how large or how small we want to make it. And then we have the language displayed, because we can change it from English to French, whatever we need to do. Okay. And then we have a tools menu. These tools are all provided. They're pretty much standalone, so we actually have a Hyperfile SQL Center. For those of you who've used SQL Server and you've got the Enterprise Manager, we have the equivalent thing for that with Hyperfiles. We have WD Map, where we can actually go out and look at the data without having to run the program. We have all these different tools, and actually if we choose to go here to WD Tool, we now have a tool center that we can run it from if we choose to. And some of these tools can be redistributed to your end user with your application, such as if you need to rebuild a data file or reindex that, or if you want to optimize it, you can distribute that. We also have in here, which is kind of cool, so you'll notice all these. We also have WD API. So if you use the Windows API but aren't quite sure how to prototype the calls, you select the call that you want and it will prototype it for you. And then we've got our robot monitor, our WDF admin. We have WD zip, where we can zip things up. We can do a test and we can do a view. As we're going through the IDE here, I just want to show you there's, and as we had said before, multiple places to get to the same thing. If we do either a right mouse click on 32 or when you're running 64-bit, you can see everything that's available to us that we can configure, turn on, turn off just from here. What's also nice is we can back up our environment and save it in case you have multiple monitors. You can say this is a setup for one monitor, this is a setup for multiple monitors. That can be saved here. Oh, so we set up our, from that pane, in fact, let's go do that. Let's set this up from here, and let's do find and replace. And we'll do that here. You'll notice it now added it here for us. If we want to also do code, and we want to look at code, it's now added it here for us. So this is also highly configurable, and we can then save these configurations, and next time we come in, we've got it here. What impresses me so much about the WinDev product line from PCSoft, and actually it's the WX product line, is WinDev lets you create the desktop. WB lets you create the web portion, and again, you design your windows the same. Your coding is, I'm going to say, pretty much the same. Of course, there's exceptions because you have additional features and objects behave differently. But your programming language is pretty much the same. Your design is the same. If you use WinDev Mobile for iOS or Android, and again, that's for the different platforms and different devices they have within that, as well as Windows Universal. They have responsive design within these that you don't even have to specify through code which device you're working with. It figures it out, and it knows which different windows, and so you'll create one base window, and it actually has all the different layouts for the different sizes you're working with. And then you're free to go ahead and move your controls around, so it actually will resize and look properly on these devices. And then PCSoft gives us all these fabulous tools with this. You'll notice as we created this application, we did RAD, which is Rapid Application Development. We can actually create our own RAD patterns also. So once you design or figure out how you like applications to look, how they behave, what code you want to do, you can create your own RAD pattern. So when you now start doing applications, you say, yes, I want to do RAD, but I'm going to use mine. I now know every single application looks the same, runs the same, has the same code. So once your code is bug-proof, you've got a really solid application. So I'm hoping that you've seen what you can do with the PCSoft product line. And again, if we go over here, and let's do this at the main window here, so we can order our products from here, and we're happy to help you with that. And you can download your Express versions from here and give it a try, and you know, see how it works for you. So you can do WinDev Express and you can do WinDev Mobile Express. So that wraps up this tutorial for now. So I hope you enjoyed it.